Hey everybody, I'm Anna McEwen. And now for Bob Switzer with the epic narrative.
All right. Well, at the time of this recording, it is morning time. I don't know if the sun. No, the sun is not up. Sun is not up. Yeah, it is that early in the morning right now. But that's all right because we got a story to tell. Now, basically, the next, I think we're going to finish Joshua today. I know it's multiple chapters, but they're short and there's a lot of memory involved. So we've covered it. We've covered it already in a lot of ways, and so we'll hit on all the high points for sure. But yeah, I think we'll get done today. I don't know. Is Bob up yet? Yeah, he's awake. He's over there keeping an eye on things. Doesn't want to be real talkative right now. That's all right. That's all right. So here in Joshua, we're in Joshua 22, and because we're covering a lot, it's hard to title this one. You know, we got family squabbles, we got misunderstandings, we got farewells, we got uh, blessings, we've got encouragements, we've got directives, and all that kind of stuff coming from Joshua. We got politics, we got all kinds of stuff. All right, so everybody at this point, Joshua summoned the Reubenites, the Gadites, the half tribe of Manasseh. So these are the ones that came across from the eastern side of Jordan, and all the lots have been distributed, right? Lots. The lots have been cast or drawn or whatever, and the tribes, I should say, are distributed. So there's no more like large scale assaults that are being planned. That part's all over. And after generally peace has been in place here for a while, the fear of the Hebrews' God is still in the memory of those that live in the land, that are left in the land. Joshua sends the 2.5 tribes away. Now remember, they sent only fighting men. If you remember when they came into Jericho, I think it was between 30 to 40,000 fighting men. Now I don't know how many they have left. But they've been in the promised land for about 6 years. And I'm guessing they've got about the same number. And it would be, that's a lot of people walking down the street. And other tribes, those that have been, that weren't killed by the Hebrews, by the Israelites, they're going to notice that these guys are leaving. And so it's one of those things where I think I brought it up before, where all the green zombie guys from Lord of the Rings, after they helped him, fight the Battle of Gondor and win it, it's kind of like, do we really want to send these guys home? I mean, they're kind of like security. They're good fighting men. They are people we like having around. But Joshua's like, nope, we're gonna send them. We're gonna send them back now. Verse 4, now that the Lord God has given them rest as he promised, return to your homes, to the land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you on the other side of the Jordan. Be careful to keep the commandment keep the commandment and the law that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you, to love the Lord your God and walk in obedience to him, to keep his commandments, to hold fast to him and serve him with all your heart, with all your soul. This verse, doesn't it kind of resonate with what Jesus said all of the law was contained in? Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. That's really, I sense a shift in Moses. In Joshua. I think he's starting to go back to the heart of the law. Verse 6, then Joshua blessed them and sent them away, and they went to their homes. Again, I don't know, verse 8 says it again, like, return to your homes with your great wealth, your large herds, your livestock, gold, silver, bronze, iron, and great quantity of clothing, and divided the plunder among your enemies with your fellow Israelites. Anyways, it takes, I don't know why it gets repetitive. Maybe it's just to emphasize the importance of what they did and the value that they had, but they're sent back. This is recognition that they fulfilled everything that they promised that they would. They did not go home during all the years that they were in the promised land. They stayed, they fought, they did what they were commanded to do. And they're bringing back a ton of gold and silver and plunder and clothing. This is all in fulfillment for what they did. They were equally recognized as all the other tribes that were going to stay in the promised land. So there was probably a big ceremony, big send-off. Verse 10 is where we start to get things start to get a little goofy. So in verse 10, it says, when they came to Giloth, near the Jordan, in the land of Canaan, the Reubenites, Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh built an imposing altar there by the Jordan. So they're traveling along. They're talking amongst each other, probably not for the first time, because they knew eventually this day would come. So they're talking, and they get basically to the Jordan where they're going to cross over, and they decide to build a large replica of the altar, not one to scale. This was much bigger. And they built it on the promised land side of the Jordan. And they do it according to them, and we'll see this later, right? They do this to remind the 9.5 tribes that they are also part of the promised land and that they also worship Yahweh. Now, the other tribes get wind of this, and they think that these 2.5 tribes are already turning their back on God and that they want to sacrifice to other gods. And they're doing it on this side of the Jordan in order to rain down judgment and curses on the promised land so that they would end up on the, that they being the 2.5 tribes would end up on the east side of the Jordan, and they wouldn't have any of the negative ramifications from the curses of God, from worshiping God, worshiping other gods and sacrificing to them. So this is like the whole rumor mill that's like swirling back in Israel, back in the promised land. Now, I don't know how this stuff gets transmitted so quickly. These guys, granted, they don't move fast. You got 40,000 men weighted down with multiple carts and, horses and donkeys and probably a few elephants and tons of camels, all strapped down with all the bounty and booty and all that stuff. And they're, of course, moving slowly, but they also have to keep an eye on marauders and others that might want to steal from them. Even though they've wiped out everyone and people are generally afraid of them, you don't want to be unsecure when you're transporting that kind of stuff. So it's probably taking some time. And then they build this altar, and evidently, like I said, it's like a jumbo altar. What's the word used there? An imposing altar in verse 10. So it's big. And the Israelites hear about it. I'm thinking that there's a lot of Israelites that are walking with their friends. That is not an unusual thing in a very hospitable culture that the Hebrews have developed. And honestly, the Middle East still carries a high rate of intense hospitality. You would walk with somebody sometimes for miles once they left your house or left your area, because you want them to know that you honor them, that you appreciate them, that you want others to see that you love and appreciate them. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of Israelite not co-workers, military mates. What do I want to say? Military troops? God, man, why am I not finding that word? I can see it. Anyways, Bob, you're useless. Just go back to sleep. So I'm guessing that there's a lot of them walking, and that's how word got back real quickly. They saw, basically the whole assembly stops, and they decide to build an altar, and and there's people that have been walking with them that are like, oh my gosh, this is really bad. And they hightail it back and they start spreading the word. These guys are building an altar. They're going to worship other gods, and that's going to rain down curses on us, and this is going to be horrible. So then this is how quickly things change. Man, it's crazy. So verse 12, the whole assembly of Israel gathered at Shiloh to go to war against them. That quickly, everybody decides we're gonna go kill them all. I don't know how. I mean, this again, the timeline for me is fascinating because I have no idea how long that took. All I can guess is that most people were still, came to the ceremony where they sent them off, and then we're still there, whatever, 2-3 days later, when word came back that these guys are going to worship other gods right here on the promised land, and they were like, we need to stop them now. This is crazy. This is crazy. Let's go kill them all. I don't know. I don't know why things escalate so quickly. Except at some level, this is their paradigm of how God behaves. That if you break the rules, you die. They don't see sin as the author of death. They see God as the author of death. Anyways, they head down, right? The whole assembly gets down there, and they send a representative. With him, they sent 10 of the chief men, one from each of the tribes of Israel, each the head of a family and division among the Israelite clans. They also sent Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the priest. So basically the army's coming, but they sent dignitaries in front, and they go to them, they meet with them. They're like, the whole assembly of the Lord says, how could you break faith with God of Israel like this? How could you turn away from the Lord and build yourselves an altar in rebellion against him now? Was not the sin of Peor enough for us? Up to this day, we have not cleansed ourselves from that sin, even though a plague fell on the community of the Lord. And are you now turning away from the Lord? If you rebelled from the Lord today, tomorrow he will be angry with the whole assembly and community of Israel. If the land you possess is defiled, come over to the Lord's land, where the Lord's tabernacle stands, and share the land with us. But do not rebel against the Lord or against us by building an altar for yourselves other than the altar of the Lord God. When Achan, the son of, they just keep going, was unfaithful in regards to the devoted things, did not the wrath come on the whole community of Israel? He was not the only one who died for his sin. Then Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh replied. So again, in a culture of honor, which they do have, you got this assembly of dignitaries. They come in and they start out with the accusation. They don't ask questions, which is not a good way to communicate. You always start with questions. You should always start with trying to understand the perspective of the other person. It just opens up your whole life to better communication, and honestly, better understanding. Thank you. Because you actually get understanding. I could go through many examples for you, and I think I have over the years on the Epic Narrative, where I start something. I go in knowing that I know what is going on, but I start with the question. Help me understand what's going on. Some form of that question. And then they start explaining it to me, and I realize I really didn't know. I didn't know what I thought I knew, what I was sure I knew when I went in to know and was going to respond accordingly. And then it turns out I didn't know. And I was actually pretty surprised. And honestly, most of the time that came in talking with young people, whether it be my children or young adults. I just don't have their perspective. I don't. And that's a good thing to learn. So over time, that's something, you can work on yourselves. But they came in, they made the accusations, and they gave their examples of from their history about how people who have sinned cost the community, multiple deaths. And then in verse 21, they come back. Verse 22, sorry, the mighty one, God of the Lord, mighty one, God, the Lord, the mighty one, God, the Lord, he knows. And let Israel know, if this has been in rebellion or disobedience to the Lord, do not spare us this day. If we have built our own altar to turn away from the Lord, to offer burnt offerings and grain offerings and sacrifice fellowship, other offerings on it, may the Lord himself call us into account. No, we did not. We did it for fear that someday your descendants might say to ours, what do you have to do with us? The Lord God of Israel. So sorry, I know I shouldn't read and try and think at the same time. So basically, they're like, listen, this is why we did it. We did it because you guys might forget us. We did it because your descendants might not remember that on the other side of the Jordan are 2.5 tribes of God's chosen nation. We wanted it to be built on this side of things so that you would remember that we are on the other side of the Jordan and we love Yahweh just like you do. And we worship Yahweh. And they call into account, they call on the Lord to hold them accountable, which, is pretty impressive. Now, I don't know how upset they were, but at least the eventually understanding is given. In verse 30, we see this: the Phinehas, the priest, and the leaders of the community and the heads of the clans of Israel heard what Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh said to them, and they were pleased. And Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the priest, said to Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, today we know that the Lord is with us because you have not been unfaithful to the Lord in the matter. Now you have rescued the Israelites from the Lord's hands. So all of them returned back to, went home, and they were glad to report and praise God. And they talked no more about going to war against against the Reuben, whatever they are. Sorry, the Reubenites, Gadites, and the half tribe of Manasseh. And they left the altar there, and they named it something like, "It shall be a witness between us that the Lord is God," or something like that. Like it did. I don't know. I mean, you can break it down, but basically, they named the altar, probably carved it in the side of it so that everybody would say, all right, this is not an altar for sacrifice. This is an altar for remembrance. And it's really, really big. Now, I know, it's just crazy. Crazy. Sometimes family does escalate quickly, though, because you do have a history together and you do have all of this experience that you've gone through and worked through together. And then it seems like somebody just does something completely unreasonable. And your reaction is reaction, not a response. And that's I guess what I see here. They get word back that this big altar's been built and clearly it's for sacrificing. And then they react. They don't respond. The difference is after traveling, they do send that group in to actually respond and say, all right, this is what we're accusing you of. Please reply. I imagine it was done in a big tent. Everybody's sitting around. And again, they honored one another. They didn't turn it into a fight. And then they loved each other and they praised each other and they blessed each other and they all went home. In chapter 23, it starts out with this: after a long time had passed and the Lord had given Israel rest from all their enemies around them, Joshua was a very old man. So we're talking probably another 20 years. And what we get in chapter 23 is what kind of like the end of life reflections, And this is where I start this again. I think we see another shift or opportunity to see a shift in the way that Joshua is thinking. Joshua is probably about 109, 110 years old. He seems to know that he's close to the end, and he calls for a conference. Summoned all of Israel, elders, leaders, judges, officials, and said to them, I am very old. You yourselves have seen everything the Lord has done, all these nations for your sake. It was the Lord your God who fought for you. Remember, I allotted you an inheritance for the tribes and the lands and nations that I conquered between the Jordan and the Mediterranean. The Lord your God himself will push them out for your sake. He will drive them out. You will possess the land. Be strong. Be careful to obey all that is written in the book of the law of Moses. Do not associate with these nations that remain among you. Do not evoke the names of their gods or swear by them. You must not serve them or bow down to them. Hold fast to the Lord your God as you have until now. The Lord has driven them out. No one will be able to stand against you. One of you routs 1,000 because the Lord fights for you, just as he promised. So be careful to love the Lord your God. But in turn, if you turn and ally yourself with the survivors of these nations that remain among you, if you intermarry with them and associate with them, then you may be sure that the Lord your God will no longer drive these nations out. Instead, they will become snares and traps for you, whips on your back, thorns in your eyes. Yikes. That's a terrible word picture. Then he continues. All right. So when he calls this assembly together, you're probably looking at 300 to 400 people. So I'm sure it didn't happen overnight. It probably took a couple of weeks to put together. And what I see there in those first 8 verses is really a callback to being cultural influences. He goes on, he's like, yeah, we conquered everything, but now I just need you to love God. I need you to focus on worshiping God. Don't focus on killing everyone. Now, I'm guessing, this whole meeting, this assembly had a lot of political intrigue to it because Moses had trained Joshua. Joshua took over for Moses. Joshua didn't train anybody. Joshua didn't have a guy or even several guys that he was mentoring. He kept everybody, he was in charge, and he kept it that way. But I'm guessing a lot of these people that showed up were probably wondering, was he going to choose one of them to replace him? He talks about how he divided everybody up. He sends them all over. There's no central government. There's no top-down hierarchy. And I'm guessing a lot of leaders were thinking about their future and the future of the nation. Where are we headed? Who's going to decide this? Now, remember, within each tribe, there were priests that were teaching the spiritual aspect of things, as well as ideally keeping an eye on the spiritual health of their people. And there were judges. And of course, that's the name of the next book we do. But the judges, their role in every tribe was to examine accusations, to bump it up against the law of Moses, to see and make a determination as to what should happen. So it wasn't like the people had no direction and no leadership. It was a community-built relationship, leadership. And I believe that is always at the heart of the Father, and I believe it was the heart of the church as well. When that gets established in the New Testament, I think the heart of it is, prophets, teachers, apostles, pastors, evangelists. So many people see that as a hierarchy, or even if they don't see it as a hierarchy, they see it like, well, first comes this person, then second, and then when they're done, the other 2 or 3, at least the other 2, they get involved, and then the last one, bless their hearts, the evangelists, they really just kind of run around outside doing stuff. Like they don't. They just tell everybody how wonderful God is. It's strange, the fivefold concept, but I believe it's supposed to be in community, and it was pictured here back, as this nation is being formed. In verses 9 through 12, he talks about the fact that really, like the Lord drove all the nations out. Like, don't give yourselves credit for this. Be careful, verse 11, to love the Lord your God. I think that that's vital, because he doesn't, even though he says keep the commands, keep the traditions, keep the commands, keep the law. He's really saying what he thinks is the most important, because he's dying, and he's like, yes, obey the law, but it's most important to love the Lord your God, because when you love someone, you will automatically become like that person. You become that, like that which you worship. When you worship and love the Lord your God, you're going to become like him. And what is he? He is love. He is good. He is kind. Now, I know they didn't see him that way, but part of the reason why they didn't see him that way is because they weren't really worshiping him. They were just obeying the law. And the law will break you. And verse 13, he pretty much just says, listen, the wages of sin is death. That's it. If you choose to sin, God will no longer, drive these nations out before you. They will become traps for you. Whips on your back, thorns in your eye. This is what he says. When you move away from love, you start reaping what you sow, and it gets ugly. And you start losing things that love to help you gain. In verses 14 and 15, we very much see that God is a master who brings destruction to those who disobey him. This is the misperception that Joshua has had pretty much his whole life. But a lot of people have misperceptions of who God is. And it changes the way that you interact with him, and it changes the way that you present him and represent him, or shall we say represent him, to the world around you. So it is important that we know God, and that we love God, and that we see him first through his son, Jesus, the actual word of God. And then we interpret and interact with the Bible from that position. And that's what we do here. You guys know that. All right, and next chapter, verse 1. Then Joshua assembled all the tribes of Israel at Shechem. He summoned the elders, the judges, the officials of Israel, and they presented themselves before God. And Joshua says to all the people, this is what the Lord God of Israel says, long ago, your ancestors, including blah, 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 blah. So here we see, again, he calls everybody together. And it's basically for a history lesson and testimonies. Let's see, we see in verses 14 through 16, we get this list of things to dedicate. Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods of your ancestors that they worship beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Great little verse. I know it inspires a lot of people, but there we see that people still have the gods of Egypt, the gods that were beyond the Euphrates, the gods of the Amorites, in whom, where the land they currently live is. They have these gods, and they keep them around, not so much that they were worshiping them on a regular basis. They kept them as like lesser gods, which again was the pattern of the day, right? You'd have a lot of gods, or 4 or 5 main ones, but you'd have one that you really kind of lean on. And then when that one stops kind of helping you out, then you pull another one, kind of move them to the top of the list, and you worship that one hard on for a little while. So it's one of those weird things. They had little gods still with them. And Joshua was like, you really need to focus on Jesus. You really need to center your life around one God, the God who loves you, the God who has been there before you. Oh, and before I go on, verse 12, can I just say this is kind of like, this is one of those things that like kind of out of nowhere, right? He's talking about a testimony. Verse 11, you crossed the Jordan, came to Jericho, citizens, da da da. These guys, Amorites fought you, Perizzites fought you, Canaanites fought you, Hittites fought you, Girgashites fought you, Hivites fought you, Jebusites fought you, but I gave them into your hands. This is, quote, God speaking. I sent the hornet ahead of you, which drove them out before you. Also the two Amorite kings. You did not do it with your own sword and bow. This is what's fascinating to me. I look at that and say, wait, out of nowhere, we learn that evidently there was a supernatural hornet event that drove armies away from the battlefield, so Israel had no one to fight. And some people look at that and they're like, yeah, God sent supernatural hornets to destroy the enemy. I see it like God sent supernatural hornets to avoid killing the enemy. He didn't want Israel to go to battle. He wanted them to avoid battle. Anyways, that's the way I see it. But I do come from a pretty crazy perception as to the goodness of God. So that's what I see. Verse 18, the Lord drove all these people out before us. We serve the Lord because he is our God. Joshua said to the people, you are not able to serve the Lord. He is holy. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive you in your rebellion and sin. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, he will turn and bring disaster to you and make the end of you. After all this, he's been so good to you. But the people said to Joshua, no, we will serve the Lord. Joshua said, you are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen to serve the Lord. Yes, we are witnesses, they replied. Now then, throw away all the foreign gods. The people said to Joshua, we will serve the Lord our God and obey him. On that day, Joshua made a covenant with the people there at Shechem. And Joshua recorded all these things in the book of the law. And he took a large stone and he set it there under the oak tree near the holy place of the Lord. He said, see, he said to all the people, this stone will be a witness against us. It has heard all the words of the Lord. It will be a witness against you if you are untrue to your God. And Joshua dismissed the people and each to their own inheritance. So they go through this whole covenant making thing and they witness to one another and they call down basically they just keep saying, we will reap what we sow. And if we sin, we will die, which is what we say, right? The wages of sin is death. It is not anything that we haven't already covered, but they're doing it again. And then he pulls out a stone, big rock, sets it up against it. And he's like, this is our witness. It has heard us. And I just always like to see little things like that and make, I know for some a weird connection, but there is something about the frequency of creation. I deal with this deeply in season 2, but the frequency of God's voice is in every element of creation. And we are also God's creation. So when we speak, nature hears us. And so rocks are witnesses to things, and trees and etc. And I'm not saying everything is a God. That's not what I'm saying. But it does all tie to the Creator. And it does, I've seen some of the way people can play instruments made from nature, and trust me, they sing. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff. Not just flutes. Not drums, though they count. Yes. Okay. Now I'm not going to go through all the instruments. Yes, the bowls. Yeah, the bowls made out of rock, and yeah, those things. Oh man, those things are beautiful. All right, enough. So he dismisses everyone, and it sends them away. They've all committed. They're like, yes, we are not going to serve lesser gods. We're only going to serve the Lord. And it's these are promises we've all made. We've all said, this is it. I'm never going to rely on anything but God again. And then, then we rely on other things like politics or money or something like that. And it's not, we just need to get right. That's all. It's not a thing of like, you're suddenly less than. It just means you got to refocus. And that's what Joshua did with everyone here, because this is the younger crew. And, in the last few verses here, he dies. They bury him in the land of his, where his inheritance was, in the hill country of Ephraim. Israel served the Lord throughout the lifetime of Joshua and the elders who outlived him, who had experienced everything that the Lord had done for Israel. And Joshua's bones, which the Israelites had brought up from Joseph's bones, were also buried in Shechem in a tract of land that Jacob had bought for 100 pieces of silver. And Eleazar, son of Aaron, died and was buried at Gibeah, which had been allotted to his son Phinehas in the hill country of Ephraim. So basically, in those last few verses, 29 through 33, we just see that not only Joshua dies, but eventually the whole generation of leadership that was left died. And that generation was done. And it does say that they helped keep Israel true to their covenant, true to their promise of serving only Yahweh. And that's a pretty cool thing to have written about you. Now, I know that technically, right, you can say, well, no, that's not true, because they ran from God. They worshiped other gods. Like, they kept having problems. I know. So it's not an absolute, but they're saying in a general sense, the nation didn't turn away from God. And that's a really cool, heritage to leave behind. And Joshua leaves that behind. But like I said, this generation is now gone. That generation of leadership is gone. And what we'll see next week when we start a brand new book, the Book of Judges, we'll see a new level of leadership that's been brought in. And let's just say the consistency of the lives and the worship of God, well, it may have fallen off a little bit. Anyways, we'll see you next week on the Epic Narrative, where we will break it down and give it to you straight.
Don't go anywhere. We've got Bob Thoughts.
And thanks so much for being around today, everyone. It's always a pleasure to have you here on the Epic Narrative. And, well, I have some thoughts. I didn't. Yeah. And I hope you enjoyed the episode. I truly do. I did not. I enjoy every. This is why it's hard for me to be objective, because when I listen to the episode, it becomes like the movie in my head that it is while I'm talking, and I enjoy it every time. And it's like, wow, it's hard for me to be critical of my work. I mean, I can be critical definitely of like things like my grammar and my run-on sentences and too many swallowings and too many throat clearings. All those are legitimate, critiques. But man, I like every episode. But speaking of critiques, somebody critiqued one of the episodes a while ago. It was last month, early on, and it might have been when the walls came down. I think it was that episode. They were like, "Hey, your dog was way too distracting." And I thought, well, you know what? Maybe my dog is distracting. I think it's kind of cute and fun to have him in the room while I'm recording. And at that particular recording, if it's the one I'm thinking of, we were in the RV, and he was particularly a nuisance that day. I think he wanted to bring his bone up, and it was, as big as his head, so he couldn't quite get it up the stairs, and then he was huffing at me, and it just, I probably was distracted by him too much, and I apologize. I do. For those of you that listen and you think, man, his dog, like, would he quit talking about his dog? I guess I just want to recognize that. And sometimes it's more than it should be. And I will keep that in mind when I record season six. I'm still writing it. It's going to be longer than season 1. And we kind of knew that going in, but it's at least 10 episodes longer. And I think officially season 1 was like 53. It wasn't quite a year. I thought it was a year long.
I thought it was 65, but we might hit 65 or 52. I guess it was a year long, 52. Ha! How did I mess that up? Anyways, we're going to be more than a year on season 6, and I still plan on doing an online study. I still want to try and do not a Parthenon, an online subscription to weekly meetings and conversations around each episode, just because I think it's a lot of fun. And for those of you that have already listened to season 1, and season 6 isn't necessarily going to be a strict review of season 1. It's definitely coming out differently, but it'll be good to have those dialogues, I think, and kind of talk through some of the stuff that we have heard about David's life and stuff we know that's coming up and how it impacts it. And yeah, it'll be fun for all of us. So Patreon, that's the word. Yeah, I'll be looking into that before we launch. But all that aside, I just wanted to admit that sometimes my dog might be distracting, and that's legit. The other thing I wanted to mention is this. This is I'm going to do a Bob Thoughts on it. It'll be on my Bob Thoughts Facebook page. But accountability when it comes to getting a word from God. Now, I know for some of you theologically, you're not quite sure what to do with that. But if you're reading the Bible and you get a strong sense that you're supposed to do something, or you're from a theology that allows for prophetic words. Now, I'm from that theology, but I wasn't always, so I understand both. Prophetic words, words from the Lord, a revelation, not imagination. We all have that. Anyways, you get this word and you latch onto it by faith. You latch onto this word. And what I have discovered, and this is personal, and I'll go into it more on my Bob Thoughts page, but is that when you latch onto the word, sometimes you imagine how it's going to be fulfilled, and you integrate that into the word, and you believe they're both equal, and they're not. And without what I'm going to call accountability, many lives have been, crashed and burned by what they believed was their faith in following a word from the Lord. But the reality is, they got the word from the Lord and they imagined how it would come about, and they followed through on that imagination as though it was the Lord, and it didn't come out that way. And now their lives or circumstances are devastated, or at least strongly impacted, because they refuse to let go of how they believe that word would come out. I think the only way to counteract that is through accountability, and it's not an accountability of you're right or wrong. That's an authoritative hierarchy. Accountability, I think, comes through community and through family, where they say, hey, we've been watching you, and we think you might have missed it. It doesn't mean that you're evil. It doesn't mean that you've sinned. It doesn't mean that what you heard wasn't true. It's just something isn't right. The evidence isn't backing up what you've put your faith in. And for me, that that legitimately happened. I definitively believed God was going to come through in a specific way, and I've brought it up on this show many times. I believed the Lord would give us, we stepped out in an RV waiting on the Lord to open up the next door. Looking back, that was my imagination on how I believed the word of the Lord was going to come forth. I believed the invitation would come while we were on the road. And we sacrificed a lot. And basically, obviously our lives were put on hold. A lot of money is gone. A lot of money. Anything we had in savings is gone. And that's because I believed I was walking in faith. But in reality, I was called out and by people who absolutely loved me. And they were like, maybe. God's going to come through a different way. And I stepped back and was like, wow, they might be right. And to be fair, my wife was one of those people. And she probably had brought it up several times in the journey. But my optimism and hope can be quite overwhelming. But we have taken a different approach now. We are going to look kind of to settle down and I still believe God's going to come through. I really do. And I think my wife does as well. But we're not committed to the fact that he's going to do it while we're on the road. We're just going to wait for his goodness. He always comes through. His goodness knows no ends. And that is what my faith is in. And I hope you enjoyed this week's thoughts on the epic narrative. We'll talk again next week.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to this podcast on any platform you use. You can also reach out to Bob for questions or booking at thebobswitzer.com or email him at thebobswitzer@gmail.com. See you next week, guys.